Hi guys, welcome to Reset Equine. And this morning you are joining me whilst I have a coffee. It might become a regular thing, I'm not sure. Coffee with Reset Equine. So, this morning I've come here to talk to you guys about, obviously, a pressing issue that's come to mind. Guys, the cracks are starting to show. Slow down, slow down. Too much and too fast. And so what am I talking about? So what I'm talking about mainly is what I'm going to pretty much neatly summarize into rebound behavior. Now, to describe it to you guys, rebound behavior basically is the behavior that a biological creature or a mammal, let's talk about a mammal, we could call it horses in this example, basically displays when after a period of time they've had their normal responses and normal behaviors reduced or restrained. So you commonly see that, and rebound behavior is an over-exuberance and an over-outlet of physical responses basically to this period of time that comes after the period of restriction, where they are no longer restricted again. So rebound behavior, what does that look like? Basically, when you've had a horse in their stable or their yard all night or all day, or for a prolonged period of time, and you let them back out to the paddock, and they run around like a lunatic for a while, having a fantastic time, bucking, kicking, scaring themselves, ending up in a ball of sweat, overwhelming themselves. That's rebound behavior. Why am I talking about rebound behavior? Well, it's what everyone's doing at the moment in the equine industry, and in particular in Western Australia. So we have basically no restrictions on how competitions can happen in WA. There is no restrictions on numbers of people at competitions. There is no restrictions on how they're being done. There is nothing. So we have, as we do these days, a lot of competitions being able to be competed at. And what's happening is everyone is saying yes to everything. Yes to everything. Now, just because we can do everything, and just because we can be anything, it doesn't mean we should, and it doesn't mean we can. And the consequences do start to show. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've had a run of competitions, well, not unfortunately, but the response to is unfortunate. From the start of the year all the way through, the competition schedules have started. We have a huge percentage of the community that is competing in pony club rallies and pony club comps, as well as their normal specific discipline that they're focusing on, if that's the case. Now, if you've got your average, dressage horse, not only do they do dressage, but they could be doing show horse as well at the same time, as well as rallies. And then at the same time, there's preparation for interschools and there's preparation then for nationals. On top of that, you can have your eventers, and they're also doing dressage competitions to hone and prep on their dressage side of things. They're also doing show jump competitions. Cross training is a real and valid thing that we understand is really important these days, but there is always a competition available every weekend. Always, every weekend. And one, your horse can't compete every weekend sustainably, and two, you can't be the best athlete every weekend sustainably for them. And mums and dads, you can't be the best mentor every weekend sustainably for your child athlete, or even for your child's equine athlete or your equine athlete. We work busy days, we have an expensive sport, and it's a long, hard slog throughout the week to make the weekends achievable. So every weekend is too much. You will find that the average horse competing at an international level, preparing for Olympics, for example, or World Equestrian Games, there is no way they would be doing the rigorous competition schedules without the planned, decent recoveries and management that the average pony club or youth horse would be doing as they do these days. There is no way that that would be happening. And the reason why is because it's not sustainable for either the athlete, the human athlete, or the equine athlete to get the most out of the picture. So we really need to be looking at what we're doing at the moment. There is so much opportunity, and it is so important that we can be grateful for that opportunity and uptake that opportunity, but we have to be grateful too for the fact that we are working with humans, and we're working with animals that need rest and need recovery to be their best. Why get out there and do everything when you can get out there and do occasional better? And picking the battles. Just because we can do everything doesn't mean we should. Just because you can be anything doesn't mean you can do everything. So, when we're thinking about the issues and the cracks that start to show from this, the problems that we have are recovery. Recovery cognitively and also physically for both horse and rider. And really, I'm just going to focus in on the horses here in this situation because that's my jam, that's my niche. So when we talk about competing every single weekend, we aren't just talking about the competition window, the 5 to 6 minute dressage test. We aren't talking about the 3-minute or 1 to 3 minute show jump round. It's a very long show jump round, but you know what I mean. We aren't just talking about the cross country, for example. We're talking about the multiple preparations in a day if the horse has had multiple warm-ups. We're talking about all the preparations for the competition. We're talking about our freedoms leading to the fact that we are taking our horses longer distances in floats. Yeah, they're not having to walk themselves there, but they're having to walk the whole way there and balance the whole way there in the float. So it is quite a physically demanding environment. On top of that, when we're talking about multiple days of competition, we're talking about horses being in environments which they're not accustomed to. Most horses in Australia spend more time in paddocks and yard situations than they do in stables. When we're talking about competitions, we don't have that opportunity for the horse to rest, relax, and wind down. The other thing is it's a foreign environment for it. So the capacity for recovery is also reduced because the horse is in a new environment, basically. If we sort of think about it from the basis of, from yourself, if you're thinking about doing an examination and you've been learning how to do for the last week a new skill, because let's face it, most of us are actually teaching our horses new skills as we are continuing to compete them and perform them. You've been learning that new skill for a week at school or at work, for example, and then you're on the weekends, you're taken to an environment you've never been before. And it's a very, very different environment, and you're sat down and you're examined on that, basically. If you're doing that weekend after weekend after weekend, but not understanding why you're being taken there and who's taking you there, cognitively, that can be overwhelming. And if you're not expecting to be taken there as well, cognitively, and that can be quite draining mentally for you. Well, when we think about it from the horse, it's hard to think about it in the context, but that's probably bearing it down as far as we can to relate to them. They have a much smaller capacity to understand what's going on. So what they do is they get left with the physical stress from the stimulus of the environment. I mean, none of you can tell me, even though you choose to be there at competitions, you choose to do what you do, that you get through the weekend without it being a slightly stressful environment. It is tiring. It is emotionally, cognitively, and physically tiring. And you have the understanding to be aware that you're going there for a particular reason and focus on that. So it is tiring for them. They need the time to recover. One of the things that we often hear about too is competition fitness, and that justification for the horse going, or the pony going to competitions to then gain the fitness that they will from the actual competition. And I'm just going to put it out there, and I'm going to be rude, and I'm going to call BS on this one. Competition fitness is BS. What you're going to gain from competition, what you're purely and only going to gain from competition, is the opportunity to prove the skills that you've taught your horse, actually use the fitness you've developed, and give it exposure. Now, all of those things can happen aside from a competition. When we think about horses, the only thing that we're going to gain from a competition environment, basically, is the generalization and exposure to new uncontrolled environments effectively. We can do that any other time with any other opportunity. We don't just need to go to competitions for that. However, the thing that does differ, and anyone will argue this to be that at a competition it's different, it's the nerves of the rider, it's the environment, it's the humans around them that do change, but you can prepare the horse for different scenarios. Now when it comes to physical fitness, competition physical fitness, if you're gaining fitness from competitions, you are not preparing your horse enough. Let that sink in. If you are gaining fitness from competitions, you are not preparing your horse enough, and it is risky. Yes, what you do at competitions, you would never repeat that on a regular basis at home with your horse, but the thing is, that's not how we gain fitness. Marathon runners don't basically go to a marathon and expect it to push them over the edge for their fitness. They don't run a marathon every day either. They run sets of marathons. And the reason I really want to get this through to people is the justification that going to competitions will prepare the horse for competition. No, going to competitions puts pressure on you and your horse to perform in that specific moment with everything you've prepared. And if you don't have that, and if your horse isn't competing the way it normally would, it isn't performing because it's a new environment and it's being expected to adapt and develop competition fitness, or you're nervous, or you're not feeling up to par, or something happens like a gazebo blows away, the thing is, what you will do is you'll find in that moment that you're under pressure to perform the best you can, and you won't probably stop. Remember, everything we do with our horse develops training, it lays down neural pathways, so it's a learning experience. Why make the majority of what you're doing in a new environment a pressured situation where it has to be perfect? Because if you're teaching your horse fitness and skills and cognitive, experiences at competitions, less than they can actually perform well at, then unfortunately you're teaching your horse to perform badly. So the majority rule rules, basically. The more you can train your horse in a relaxed environment with fitness preparation that's appropriate, prepares them for competition when things do change, because they will default back to their body if you've got that consistent training in place. So at this point of the year, I'm going to be honest, the cracks are starting to show. In Western Australia, people are doing too much, too soon. Remember, your horse last year has experienced a very unusual year potentially for it. Well, probably more unusual for you guys, but it's done less, it's had more breaks. People have focused more on slow training. They took the expectations off themselves and thought about where they're at, what they need to change, and where they want to go. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of that is getting lost at the moment. And the reality is it's coming from too much, too soon. It's supposed to be fun. We do this because we enjoy it. And some of us that do it for professional reasons, we choose to do this because we still enjoy it, because I tell you what, it'd be far easier to work in a bank or something. But the difference is we can easily lose why we're choosing to enjoy it. And the majority of you out there are not doing this for a professional reason where they have to push themselves through the bits that they don't want sometimes to get the end results. And I want to ask you, are you really enjoying it? Are you mentally refreshed enough to be able to relax into that moment? Are you physically refreshed enough to be able to enjoy what you're doing? Will you look back at this and think about all the things that you did, or will you think about just what it got you to? Because it is about the journey, and that's what your horse is experiencing. Your horse isn't experiencing where it's going in the end either. They're experiencing the journey. So if it's been a hard slog the whole way, and you've spent most of that tired and strung out and flat out and busy and possibly longing for the slowness and the speed and the progression and the nourishment of last year, then perhaps look at what you're doing at the moment. Do you need to be doing everything you're doing? Just because opportunity in our incredibly opportunistic, lucky, wonderful, privileged country and position we're in gives us these opportunities, do we have to say yes for everything? No, we don't have to say yes for everything. And the thing is in the end, is you will gain more if you learn to say no and pick those battles, because the cracks are starting to show. the performance is declining in many, many cases because it's coming down to both the physical and mental recovery of the horse and the physical and mental recovery of the rider. So just slow down. It takes time. It takes time. And it takes far, far more time than most of us are willing to acknowledge to both physically and cognitively have the horse recover and be prepared for what we're asking of it. And definitely takes far, far more time for humans to physically and cognitively recover from all the expectations we place on ourselves every single day and then every single weekend. So, for the rest of the day, that is my lecture. Take check, take stock, slow down. As they say, take inventory. What have you got right now? What have you got floating past you most right now? In your mind, and have a listen to it. What is going on? And then stop and think about what we do know about goals, because this is you setting goals and working actively towards them.